Hello everyone, today we're going to be talking about supply, the movements in the supply curve, and all the factors that can affect the supply of a product. So to begin with, this is what a supply graph looks like. As you can see, the supply curve always goes upwards in the graph, and the reason for that is that the supply of a product is directly proportional to its price. When the price of a product goes up, the quantity that's being manufactured also increases, and thus the supply will always go up. Increase in the price results in the increase in the supply of a product. Now there's two things that we need to keep in mind when we look at how a supply curve works, how the supply graph changes. So when the supply increases, the entire supply curve shifts to the right. But if the quantity supplied is being increased, that doesn't mean that the supply curve is moving. What that means is that the supply has increased from one point on a graph to another point on the same graph. So the graph entirely hasn't changed. It's the same graph, just moving from one point to another. So here we've got two graphs that can show how the supply of a product can increase in two different ways. So the graph on the left shows when there's a movement along the existing supply curve. As you can see, when the price of the product increases from $5 to $10, the quantity that's being supplied increases from 100 units to 100 units. And the supply moves from point A to point B on the same curve. Now on the right, we can see when there's a shift in the entire supply curve. So the entire curve has moved to the right, and the price has stayed the same. The price hasn't changed. The quantity that's being supplied at the same price of $5 has now increased from 100 to 200 units. Now there is a bunch of different reasons that can cause a movement of the entire supply curve. The most obvious one being the number of sellers. If the number of sellers increases, the quantity that's manufactured increases and the supply is going to go up. The other factors are labor, material costs, and the price of related goods. What that means is that if it costs less money for a company to manufacture a product, then they're going to manufacture more of that product. So a real life example that I took a look at is the disruption in the Russian oil supply in 2022. So when Russia invaded Ukraine, a lot of companies placed sanctions, and a big chunk of that went to oil because Russia is one of the largest oil exporters in the world. The amount of oil that was being supplied in the global market went down rapidly. And so if there was less of oil that was being sold, then the price of the oil that was being sold increased. What basically happened is the supply curve of oil moved to the left, and so it decreased the supply of oil that was being sold.